Hi, this is Mike Galen with the Brake Report, and today we're speaking with Doug Dole, who's the General Manager of Product Strategy for Meritor. He works out of their aftermarket headquarters in Florence, Kentucky, not far from Cincinnati. Hello, Doug.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks. How are you?
Good.
So recently at the Heavy Duty Aftermarket Week, you made a presentation on a number of topics, including the air disc brake business. And during the presentation, you mentioned that by 2024, expect that virtually half of the Class 8 vehicles operating, I guess, in North America will be equipped with air disc brakes. In the same presentation, you mentioned that the European market is at 80%. Can you tell us why the market here has moved, taken its time in getting to that kind of number, and why Europe seems to be outdistancing us on this?
Yeah, so in Europe, I think as a lot of folks know, the fleets do not have the ability to spec product on their trucks as they do in North America. So the fleets have a lot of power in North America to order a truck that is designed and spec to what they want to use in the market. And from an air disc brake perspective in North America today, we have been able to meet the stopping distances with a drum brake. And so all of the legislation that we have today, we are meeting with the drum brake. So when a fleet goes to spec a truck today, they look at that, and then there's a value proposition that they've got to look at as it relates to, do I want to spec an air disc brake on this truck, or do I want to keep drum brakes? And there are a lot of fleets today that look at that and say the value proposition is not there for me, because I can either get a credit to go to a drum brake, or it's an upcharge to go to an air disc brake, however you want to look at that. And so they have been continuing to spec drum brakes. Now, there are certain vocations too that a drum brake is a better application for. Most of those are not over the road type things, which is where a lot of the trucks are going. But they would use that, and they look at that as a value prop and say, what do I want to do with my trucks? Now, a lot of big fleets have done things to spec the air disc brake. They see the value in that, and then there's other ones that just have not done that.
You say the value proposition is such. I think you're being kind of, as opposed to just pricing of the two systems. What's the major advantage of this air disc brakes versus drum for even fleets over the road?
Yeah, so from an air disc brake perspective, the initial maintenance on that would be a lower maintenance charge, because all you're doing is basically changing out pads, where with an air disc brake, you have to take the drum off, you've got to replace things. And so initially, and the pads are cheap. So initially, for the first 5 to 7 years of that, it's going to be a cheaper operation for you to be able to replace just the pads. Where once you have to get into the calipers and do those kind of things, you've got a curve that goes up that says, okay, initially drum brakes are more expensive. Air disc brakes are down here, drum brakes are here. When you get into the caliper replacement, those lines intersect, and then it's about longer term. And what we've looked at long term, it's about the same type maintenance, but early in that cycle, it's a little bit less expensive. So maybe the bigger fleets look at that and say, it's a little less expensive for me in my first 5 years, and I can justify that. It does have, I believe it does have some stopping distance benefits, and fleets look at that from a safety perspective and say, yeah, let's use an air disc brake as opposed to drum.
From a manufacturing perspective, and I know you're not in production, or is it simpler to spec out and use air disc brakes? Is that what Europe did, as you said, but since the fleets don't spec, or is it just simpler to, when you're building something, to stock one type of part component for production?
I think in Europe, and I would have to go back and verify this, Michael, but I think in Europe, there are some legislations that help to drive the adoption of air disc brake a little bit higher than North America. So what that legislation is, I couldn't quote you here, but I think that helped to drive some of that as well. and then consistency at the manufacturer. They could spec and say, this is how I'm going to build my truck, and that's what they offered.
Speaking of the two systems, but in this case, air disc brakes, what's the primary outlet for Meritor to sell air disc brake systems and components? Is it the aftermarket or is it the OEM market?
It's both for us. Today we are, 30 to 40% of the production business. So we've made some really good inroads. We've got, standard position on specific platforms at Daimler, Volvo, and other OEMs. So we do have that standard position, and we are the standard option on those. So we're getting a lot of penetration. We see that growing in the future based on the wins that we've recently had on the air disc brake side of the business. But we also have a really good aftermarket in that. And so not only do we have air disc brakes for the Meritor products, but in our Plainfield location, we remanufacture calipers, not only ours, but we also do Bendix brakes. We offer solutions for Wabco and other calipers in the market today. So we've got a full portfolio in the aftermarket where we can, if you need an air disc brake, we can provide that to you.
This is my ignorance, but I'd like to ask the question: do your aftermarket componentry and systems allow for conversion of a vehicle from drum to air disc brakes?
That's a little bit. That's a little bit tricky for us, and it's very expensive to do that.
Oh, okay.
But what we do, and this has been a really good program for us. We actually have an offering where we have redesigned our pad carriers and done some different things where we can take our competitor's brake and we can put our brake on in place of our competitors. So we've got some features and benefits, especially on some of the severe duty applications where we've got a dual piston versus some of our competitors have single pistons in those applications. We can take our unit and actually put it on their in their envelope. And we've had some really good success in being able to do those conversions and getting our product out there that way.
Much I like in the automotive side, with brake kits are sold to replace one type with a different, one brand with a different brand.
Now we do that too. The pads are one thing, and there's a lot of people that are in the pad business, that are offering pads out there. We do have a full line of pads where we can offer ours and our competitors, but the bigger piece of that are the calipers.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody has a caliper that they can offer the market. So we've got not only ours, but and competitors' calipers, but we also have redesigned our calipers to fit where our competitors' calipers are in certain applications that have been good for us.
Speaking of pads, copper regulations in North America,
Mm-hmm.
do they impact the commercial vehicle market like they do the automotive?
For sure. Yeah, I believe it's 2025. They all have to be copper free, and all of our air disc brake is already there. We do have some of our competitors that have some mixes that they're still working on to get there. But when we came out with what we are putting in the market today, it's a copper free pad.
Well, thinking of regulation, be it emission regulations like that, where we talk about the makeup of a pad or anything else, what do you see as in the future for braking systems for the commercial vehicle industry? Where do we evolve? Right now we have drum brakes, we have air disc brake systems, and I'm not talking about some of the smaller side businesses, those very specially, but I'm talking the general,
Yeah, here's what we see. We see a lot of enhancements on current systems. So when you think about telematics, you think about sensing, you think about what are the things that are going on around those brakes that we can today we have a workable system where we've got sensing and telematics on a truck. I was in Troy here a month or so ago. We can do that today where we can sense and provide feedback to drivers and or maintenance guys that says, your brakes are heating up, or we think you've got a brake that's dragging over here that you need to do something with. So that is going to be a lot of things that you're going to see in the future. It's what can we do to sense and not only provide data back to the fleet that says, you've got a problem, but provide data back to the fleet that says your pad is wearing down, so you need to schedule maintenance. And even longer term, say, and here's where the parts available, you can go there and get your work done. Those kind of things are future, but today there is sensing technology that's out there that can provide that type of data and that type of information.
Electrification is growing rapidly within the entire transportation world, not just automobiles where it's getting the most publicity, but even in rail, in air, in aviation, it's being talked about, empowering boats, ships, and of course, trucks. And we're talking about electrification can come in the form of hydrogen power, battery electric, and hybrid. Now, what impact do you see the growth of electrification on the braking aspects in the commercial vehicle world?
Yeah, so Michael, you're exactly right. This is a growing market, and we are actually right in the middle of that market. We came out with our brand called Blue Horizon, where we have a fully functional e-axle. We can provide actually the whole system, including the PCAS, the batteries. We've got the capability through our acquisition we did with TransPower to provide that full system to our OEMs. And we actually have our first production. We were the first to produce an e-axle in production that's going on a truck as we speak. So we are in the forefront of everything that's going on the EV side of commercial vehicles. Now, what we can tell you about the brake side of that is with these motors and with the technology that we have in the EV system, there is a lot of regenerative braking that happens with that through the motor. And the wear and tear on those brake components are certainly going to be impacted. The need to use your brakes the way we do today is going to be lessened in the future just because of the regenerative braking and what they have going on with the motors and the technology that they're putting in the e-axle today. So that's going to have an impact of lowering the need for those components in the aftermarket. Now, the design of that system has to still have the same capabilities as far as stopping power and stopping distances and all those things because of an emergency stop. If you have to have an emergency stop, you have to have the same capabilities there. They're just not going to wear out as quickly as they do today because there's going to be a lot of help in that braking through the motors and the technology that they have in the e-axle.
Interesting. Speaking of today, and I'm going to ask, maybe it's unfair because you're not in production, but I'm curious because you do work at Meritor, you might know. We all heard about the chip shortages the last 18 months or so. Again, the primary discussion's been how it's impacted the auto industry and run inventories way down from where they were. And right now, there's another impact on production occurring in that industry due to a problem with a protest on the Ambassador Bridge on the Canadian side of the US-Canadian border over the Detroit River. Has any of that filtered down to the truck business that you know of at Meritor, impacting production?
For sure. It's impacting the whole trucking industry, that the chip shortages, and that's certainly what we believe and what I've heard is the number one thing out there that's impacting the market, to the tune of it makes it difficult for the OEMs to forecast, to provide us accurate forecasts so we can have accurate build schedules for them. But even it's limiting the number of trucks that we can build in the market. I sat on a panel discussion at HDAW, and one of the things that the guy there was a gentleman on there with me that was he was a fleet maintenance director, and they cannot order and buy enough trucks to be able to satisfy their needs. So they're not getting enough new trucks. So the life or the age of his fleet has increased pretty dramatically over the last 12 months because all the trade-ins that he expected to do couldn't happen, which creates another issue for them in that they have incremental maintenance charges that they're going to have to absorb and have to take care of because they're keeping their trucks longer. So that's kind of good for the aftermarket because it's providing more part sales for us. But the fleets are looking to buy more trucks and can't do it because the production is throttled back for sure.
Interesting. Is there any area that you can think of that I haven't even touched on that would be important enough for our viewers and audience in the terms of the commercial vehicle business?
Yeah, if again on the panel discussion I was on at HDAW, one of the things that we spent a lot of time talking about was just labor shortages, and that is another thing. Even though supply chains have limited production, labor has as well, and that's been a big issue for us as a company, and that's getting better. We've done some things with wages. There's been some government regulations that have been addressed that are helping that. So that's something that we're digging out of, but it's created an issue for supply in the market just because of labor issues that we've seen, over the last 4 to 6 months.
One last question, which really is off field where we've been, but labor is what kicked it off in my mind. All these new braking systems that have evolved in the last several years with the help of ABS and other ADAS systems, has it brought about the need to retrain or train drivers in a different means than they've been trained before? Do they have to learn how to drive differently because the brakes operate differently?
That's a good question, Michael. I don't really know the answer to that. I don't know that those brakes are that different. I think when you think about some of the safety systems that you have with radar and some of those, I would suspect that took some driver training. So they knew why the truck was slowing down. They know why the truck is automatic braking and those kind of things. But the braking systems themselves, they're doing the same function. It's just maybe a different feel or a different touch for the driver, depending on what system he's operating in.
And since you're general manager of product strategy and you have to look forward, I'll hit you with the big question. Any breakthroughs coming that you can see? Anything you expect that's way down the road that you've maybe seen either in prototype or in concept?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for us is the EV side of the business. We are investing significant resources and dollars into the EV side of the business, and we believe, if you look at our earnings and some of the things we have, it's going to be a significant piece of our business here in the next 5 years, and certainly in the next 10 years. So that is a big push for us, and there's a lot of resources and technologies and innovations that are happening there that you see in the axle that we have today, and there's even more coming in the future on that. So that's the biggest thing, and it's going to have a significant impact on the overall commercial market for sure.
And just how strong, speaking of markets, is the aftermarket?
Right now, the aftermarket's really strong. And part of that, we believe, is because fleets are holding their trucks longer. And part of that is, the economy is pretty strong right now. So as long as those two things continue to move forward, we see a pretty strong market here this year.
Doug, thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you, and appreciate doing this. And if you need anything else, always give us a call. We appreciate it.
We've been speaking with Doug Dole, General Manager of Product Strategy for Meritor.